Okay, and we're right back. So we're going to continue. It says, does TV have a secret formula for blacks? Excuse me. I would say that it's not even a secret anymore. That's what I would say. It says, this article taken from a magazine asks the question, as I just asked. It says, look at who they are referring to here, George Jefferson and his wife. Okay? This was probably not one of the best shows on TV in terms of black images as it was an assault on the black image of the middle class. See, because when you watch George Jefferson, although you may have liked it, and that's why we have to pay attention to the content and the writing, and being a writer myself, George Jefferson, when you looked at it, it was a lot of buffoonery going on. They wanted the black men to act real aggressive, and and you see how he used to bounce around and walk around and swinging his arms and all that, you know, but unfortunately, some black folks felt like they had to do that to make inroads in, of course, to make a living. And of course, you still have that today. It hasn't changed. You still have people who are doing such things, and they may not be wearing blackface or painting their lips real red and all that kind of stuff. But as you know, they're doing it in other ways. And, as we've all seen and saw, how that nobody in terms of black folks, there's nobody that is exempt from that. And then they have black people so afraid when they get a little station in life and they make some money they have us acting like a bunch of animals. And they sit back and they laugh because they say, watch him throw his brother under the bus. Watch him throw his sister under the bus. And that's what we've been doing. And we've seen different scenarios of this. We've seen it with Colin Kaepernick. We've seen it with Kyrie Irving. We've seen it with Kanye West. We've seen it with several people. And so it goes on and on and on and on. It doesn't stop, and they have us so afraid because they hold on to the purse strings of these entertainers and what they're actually doing. That's why very seldom do you find entertainers who are detached from that or separate from that. And so this is why you see people being very careful what they say. They're very selective in how they choose their words. And because they have a thing now that's called predictable programming. So they already know what they're going to do, and they know what you're going to do. Excuse me. So let's read. And it talks about George Jefferson, as I said, and his wife. And it says this was probably not one of the best shows on TV in terms of images, as it was an assault on the black image of the middle class. Here is a man who is supposed to be at the top, but is giving a little dinky apartment in New York along with a couple cleaning establishments. So you see You see the pejorative um, framework there. He has a cleaning establishment where he's what it's supposed to be cleaners, I believe it was. Okay. While acting like a total clown, right? That's what he did. While acting like a total clown, this was what the black middle class image in the eyes of the secret formula creators looked like. So they selected this role for him. It was planned. This is how we gonna this is the image we gonna give of black people with a middle class family. With a man acting like a clown, you know what I'm saying? And his wife being loud, because you know she was loud, you know? It's pitiful. So it says again, this was, as I'm reading again, was a black middle class image in the eyes of the secret formula creators looked like. How is it? How is it possible to obtain several cleaning establishments while you are behaving like a clown? Listen to this. It would take a very intelligent person to accomplish that. But the writers never projected an image of Jefferson as a smart, responsible person. Isn't that sad, y'all? Because they didn't. Now look at this one. These were some of the prime time TV writers for black people. And they were some untouchables. Excuse me. The secret formula question raises a discussion that is very important in television. The people who write, the stories and create the shows on most prime time TV for black people are usually not black people. See that? Our black needs were not being met through these portrayals, but their needs were met by repeating those images of degraded black people. Those were the types of images these writers thought were funny when they saw the Jeffersons. Those negative images would have an effect on the children in the black community. There was practically nothing of a positive nature to turn to on the television until the arrival of the Cosby Show, which is true, at which point black people began to have some measure of control over the black images on TV, as Raphael Toussaint and Bill Cosby had a good degree of editorial control over the show. Until the Cosby Show came along, the only effective father for a black child on TV was a white father. Ain't that something? As for example, in the popular show Different Strokes, y'all remember that, here little Arnold, who is adopted, has a white father, and this was the type of image that was supposed to be the positive male image for the black child. Look at the subliminal message that was constantly being sent out to the whole black community at this time. It wasn't, in other words, as you already know, the only positive image in that show was that, well, and that could be argued, there was a white image of a male figure in the black children's life. So in other words, there wasn't no black father who was fit enough to, you understand what I'm saying? To fit the role of raising kids, which we know is a lie. And below is an image from another show, Flip Wilson, which became very popular and only lasted as long as he would dress up as Geraldine and become bizarre. But these were the types of images that the white writers delighted in. Yep. Flip Wilson show, Jimmy Walker Dynamite and all that, acting like a clown. I met that clown in California. Well, I didn't really meet. He didn't want to speak with me when I lived out there. he was in. We was in. A friend of mine, excuse me, we was in Venice Beach, and we seen him with his snow bunny, and he didn't want to speak. And I'm like, man, I said, forget you, you washed up clown. Excuse me, y'all, but that was over 20 years ago, so I didn't take offense to it. You know, well, I kind of did then, but you know, anyways. So it talks about the Flip Wilson Show, the Globetrotters, Sanford and Son, Jimmy Walker Good Times, and it says, notice how happy they all appeared. Now go back to Stephen Fetchit and take note of any differences from among those images of the 70s and 80s that were still being presented. The point is, these images were not innocent, because if you go back in history, you will realize that if people are allowed to twist the images of any group or population, it will then becomes easy to manipulate other dominant populations to do negative things, as was the case during the height of the Ku Klux Klan era. Wow, man, it showed them hanging people on trees, and it can be seen from the following pictures that the propaganda images were very serious issues indeed, based on the burning and lynching which followed and became very rampant. So they didn't value black life, and they don't today. And when they did the thing with the celebrity dolls, y'all remember that, which the black children was picking up as a result of those TV shows just mentioned, and noticed the Fred Sanford and J.J. dolls. In other words, children were taking these images from the television and turning them into their own real life images, because all of that stuff was internalized. It was internalized. So it was no wonder when black kids, when they did the study with the black dolls, black kids were choosing the white dolls because they were programmed. It was self-hate. They was creating self-hate. And how could you, I mean, you really think about that. You have to be a real sick individual. That's why I said it's a disease, it's a sickness. You have to really be a sick individual to infuse all these images and it's, wow. And it hasn't stopped. That's the thing. It's so subliminal now. It hasn't stopped. It really hasn't stopped. They're doing it in commercials. They're doing it in ads. And so you have to really pay attention. And of course, this is done because people, this is survival. This is survival for this group. It's survival. It's war. It's about survival. And the only way that you feel like you could survive is to do this. Then that's what's going to be done. This is warning: the news you watch tonight may not be the truth. So you got to remember that, because we already know that there's a lot of news that goes out that's so parroted that you see a lot of the news anchors, they're repeating the same thing. You go from one station to the next, you hear the same thing, because they're programmed, and it's to program you. So that's why you have to really be on top of this. There are some people like Dan Shore who spent their time researching academic analysis of the media and its messages, who gave a warning in the article on the left that even in the news, the messages may be conflicting, so one has to be careful. This would apply to everyone and not just to blacks alone. Other authors have written books on the very subject. which focuses mainly on the TV media. Subliminal seduction is the case in point where on the cover of the book, the word sex is written in the ice cubes on the glass, which looks like shadows, so that it is not received directly but subliminally. Those in the field must have known about 20 years or more ago how people could easily be manipulated. That is, prompted them to move into the direction of flashing certain information as subliminal images on the screen just fast enough to be picked up, not with the eyes but by the brain, so that you get the message without realizing where it came from or even that it was received. Subliminal messages can be more powerful at times than the actual direct message because people are not aware that it is being fed into their brain. And it's basically, it goes into what we talked about before, your subconscious. So, because sometimes you'll be like, you'll be watching something, and have you ever had this experience where you say, wait a minute, did I just see that? And it was like a quick flash. And you was like, oh, hell no. Let me play that back. And then you caught it. You'd be like, look what they doing. Or look what they saying. Because in a lot of the Disney movies, there's a lot of sexual innuendos going on. And I looked at some of that stuff and I was like, what? And one of the cartoon images one time, I was looking at something, and you know that Disney or Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse and all that, sometimes you look on some of their posters, or you'll see in some of the cartoon ads, you'll see penises that are being drawn with kids around. It's terrible. You'll see 666 in their logo. You'll see a lot of stuff if you pay attention. Because I looked at it and I said, oh, they're trying to hide it, but it's in plain sight for you to actually see. Just crazy stuff. Therefore, if someone has the means to consciously manipulate images with a history of having intentionally done so, it means that a whole generation must be educated about this aftermath. It is crucial that the people who are being victimized by this activity the most should become critical observers. This can be done once they are made aware of it, because the mind cannot easily be programmed if you are aware that someone is trying to program it. And this is what we've been talking about. We've been talking about awareness, amongst other things. So you have to pay attention. Now look at some of the contrasted images for white males. Then try to imagine anything but by the way of comparison for the black male. Look at Gary Cooper and Marlon Brandon. There was no Gary Cooper or Marlon Brandon that was popular among black people. So they made all, and as you already know, all positive images. There's even a white female Tarzan named Sheena. So with the advent of women's liberation, white women could now go over to Africa and do to the Africans what Tarzan used to do. Wow. It shows in the picture on the right, and it talks about summation again of the role. Our black children using only half of a brain. Notice the gaze at the Superman image. That is the kind of projection that was being used for the other populations, while at the same time a degraded image of black people was being projected. In other words, a young black child who has not come from the old world will not have anything positive to feed on, to nourish and educate his mind. So it becomes necessary to produce this type of information for dissemination, which attempts to show the corrected version of the history of Africa and black people in general. But we have a lot of positive images of black people now because obviously we have more woke people now who are putting images up of our people and dismantling a lot of the old stereotypes that, you know, were thrust upon our people unjustifiably, you know. Of course, we have to save our young people from this kind of stuff. The African survivors of the Middle Passage were subjected to one of the most brutal forms of oppression and exploitation in human history. They were forced to adopt foreign cultures after being uprooted from their homeland and stripped of their culture, language, traditions, and history. As a result, unlike other immigrants, they do not know their original names, tribes, cultures, languages, or even religions. They were whipped, maimed, raped, murdered, completely dehumanized, and reduced to chattel property to be bought and sold like animals. The Africans were subjected to a new phase of subjugation, Jim Crow, after the end of slavery, where every aspect of life became segregated, including the restaurants, schools, hospitals, transportation, sports, recreation, prisons, orphanages, funeral homes, morgues, and even the cemeteries, which is true. The myth of white supremacy and black inferiority were instituted to justify slavery and the Jim Crow laws. Lynching soon became a commonplace practice against blacks, such as between 1882 and 1968. About 4,742 Africans in America were brutally lynched, hanged, castrated, burnt alive, and decapitated. My God. The lynch mobs acted not only with impunity, but also with a form of demented pleasure, which is true. They dressed up on Sunday like they was going to some show. They dressed up and they sold postcards and took body parts and put them in jars and they sold them out of shops. Just heinous stuff. Only with impunity, but also with a form of demented pleasure, referring to the burning of Africans as Negro barbecues. Ain't that something? The perpetrators brought their families and friends to watch the show, called The Show, and took great pleasure in photographing the happenings as if attending some major sporting event. The photographs were usually used to create postcards, as I just said. While all these atrocities were going on, the federal government stood idly by and allowed these vicious acts to continue for many years. The federal government, that's what they did. Burning us at the stake. And that's where, of course, the famous Billie Holiday, who sung the song Strange Fruit, hanging from the poplar tree. Terrible. So we're going to stop there for tonight. And when we come back the next time, we'll be continuing. So, Patahites, until the next time, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And we appreciate you so much. We'll be going into the African story rewritten on the next one because we have so much to give you, as we mentioned before. We talked about the sacred secretion. We're putting that together. So we're going to create, it's so much, we have so much information to disseminate to you. So it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. So of course, continue to stay with us, support us. It only takes a like or a share, and we just appreciate you guys so much. So until next time, this is Seth Moore again, coming at you from Anchor by Spotify. Remember to visit us on Patreon, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Apple Music, Buzzsprout, and many, 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 many more. So you guys have a great night. Rest well, travel, and sleep well. We'll see you the next time. Take care. All right.